All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. It's just past 1 o'clock here, so in the interest of time, we'll get this webinar started. So first of all, I just want to thank everybody for jumping on today and registering for our webinar. Today we're going to be talking about the Grizzly Steppe Russian cybercrime ring that's been going on in the cyber activity, and I'm sure you've all heard about it in the different news outlets and the impact that they may or may not have had on the election and whatnot. So we're going to cover some of the pieces in there today. Before we get started, though, I just want to go over a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, all lines have been muted to minimize any type of distractions during the presentation. So if you have any questions or anything, we'll have time at the end for a question and answer session. If you want to pop those into the chat box, you can go ahead and address those to me. My name is Jeff Yeagley with Compass, or you can address them to everybody, and we can answer those again at the end. Today's presenter is Amy Johnson with Compass IT Compliance. Amy works on our information security side of the practice, so our security assessment services, vulnerability scanning, pen testing, kind of our best practices type areas. So she has extensive experience dealing with all of these types of different known bad actors that are out there. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this presentation over to Amy. So take it away, Amy.
Thank you, Jeff. So as Jeff said, my name's Amy, and I'm going to be going over what the Grizzly Steppe activity is and what it had as an effect on the U.S. political party. So on the agenda today, like I just said, we're going to be going over Grizzly Steppe. I am going to be going through the different advanced persistent threats, or APT, which there was 29 and 28, and they did happen in that order, 29 first and then 28 after. I'll be going over the Russian hacking tactics, which the tactics they use to conduct their activity, prevention methods to avoid cyber threats such as, of course, the Russian ones, common vulnerabilities that a hacker may look for, which would allow them into your systems that can be avoided, and some security best practices that should be implemented in an organization. So what is Grizzly Steppe? Well, it is cyber activity being run by Russian intelligence, and the government has thus named it Grizzly Steppe. There were 2 Russian cyber attacks conducted by Russian intelligence services, or RISs, which were Advanced Persistent Threat 29 and Advanced Persistent Threat 28, also known as APT. So both attacks were carried out about a year apart, APT 29 being in the summer of 2015 and APT 28 in the spring of 2016. So both of these threats targeted the same U.S. political party about a year apart, and they both successfully gained unauthorized access to confidential information, both using phishing attacks with kind of like a little twist on how they do it. So they didn't just focus on U.S. political parties. They have also focused on other organizations, think tanks, universities, numerous corporations, all sorts of things like that. So it's not only just political parties being focused on. They're kind of taking on anything they can. So the first string of Russian activity, APT 29, they had a specific method that allowed the infiltration of information from the U.S. campaign. So this is a brief diagram of the steps taken, and the activity occurred in 2015, as mentioned before, to the U.S. political party. It began with a spear phishing campaign that they emailed to numerous U.S. political employees, and this email contained a web link to a malicious site that ultimately, once it was clicked, it would execute code onto the targeted system. And now, APT 29 used a domain that seemed trusted, so that's why a lot of users clicked it, because they didn't see any reason to doubt it. So they were able to retrieve about 1,000 emails out of all that. As for APT 28, which is the most recent, they also used spear phishing campaigns. However, they were able to retrieve user credentials this time, which kind of gave them a new leverage into the system. So this one compromised the same U.S. political party as APT 29 just a year later. It was done by mimicking a trusted domain, and it was used to send the phishing email similar to APT29. However, they kind of put a link in there and they would say, you need to change your password. So once the user clicked this link, they would be directed to a malicious site, and this malicious site would have them put in their credentials, which then was logged for the Russian threat to further use. So how was it done? This is a document explaining the Russian tactics, which the FBI released, and it was kind of an intent to embarrass them, saying, hey, we know how you're doing it, and we're going to release it to everyone. So as mentioned before, the Russian intelligence services activity, also known as Grizzly Steppe, used emails to gain unauthorized access into targeted systems. So the attacker would leverage their way into the company's operations to obtain necessary email addresses that they would focus on and that they would target. The IRS created an email with the malicious link that is then sent to the users they found through a seemingly trusted email address that would give them no reason to think there was anything wrong with it or it was weird to click on or anything. So the recipient thus is tricked into clicking on the malicious link in the email, and it asks them to change their password on this other site, and by entering their credentials, it was then logged for the attacker to use. So then the RIS would go back into the operational infrastructure to direct themselves into the necessary system that they were targeting. Now, once they were in this system, they would use the credentials to get in, and they would install some malicious files, which these files would move through the data to gather the proper information that they were looking for, which was, of course, confidential information that they thus released, and it gets exfiltrated back out for the Russian entity through the other side. Now, someone might be thinking, how does an organization allow unwanted activities such as this to happen? Because these are avoidable. Well, there's a few common vulnerabilities, and this is only 3 of them, there are more, that cyber threats might focus on. The first one being injection flaws, which if a user input is being stored in the back-end database on a web application, it's very possible that an attacker could use this to steal the user input. And this is done by an attacker technically breaking out of the web application, quote unquote, and having access to unintended functionalities. The second one, very common vulnerability, cross-site scripting, also known as XSS. And this vulnerability allows an entity to inject malicious scripts into a vulnerable web page. And these scripts could allow them to input a malicious link, which would trick the users going to that original web page to click the link and get directed to a third-party malicious site. So it's intended to trick the users who go to the website, essentially. And the last one, server vulnerabilities, which are very, very common. And basically, these are any vulnerabilities in a server are susceptible to an attack. And this is a very common area of focus for a hacker because it can allow them unauthorized access to sensitive information, user accounts, DNS, DHCP, just very important areas of data. And there can be authorization flaws or misconfigurations in the security, just as a few examples of how a server vulnerability would appear. So now on to prevention, which the big question after hearing about all of what the Russian are capable of doing is how can I prevent or lessen my chances of this happening to my system? So there are a few steps that can be taken that can help prevent or mitigate these attacks, making you more or less of a target. So the first one, you want to review file hashes because they can allow the user to know if a file has been altered. So if you have 2 files that are the exact same, the file hashes will be the same. Now, if you see that one of those file hashes are changing, then you know the data in one of them has changed, which can kind of throw a signal that you might be being hacked. And going along with that is creating a YARA rule, which will monitor files for malware. So YARA rules will not necessarily help well, they will help prevent, but they won't prevent the initial attack. So once an attack happens, you can review the YARA rule, see where it happened, and kind of prevent it in the future, so you'll know where to fix your flaw. And it basically scans for file manipulations that expose how an entity gained access to your systems. Next, you want to monitor IP addresses to see what activity is going on. You want to watch for any unusual activity that can be deemed as malicious. There are lists online that give examples of IP addresses that are actually connected to Russian activity. So as a best practice, you could look up these lists and you could block them from getting into your system, which would kind of be more of a safe way to prevent any Russian IP addresses in. You also want to check logs, which can show unusual activity that may have gone unnoticed. You want to check these logs every day just to ensure full protection and security. It's just a simple thing to do. Also, when reviewing traffic, you want to watch for activity that may be disguised as legitimate. These can be disguised as something like vulnerability scans on public-facing services, kind of like HTTP, HTTPS, FTP. And the purpose of an attacker scanning these ports is to ultimately identify vulnerabilities that can allow for things like cross-site scripting or SQL injections, as mentioned before. So the prevention methods just mentioned are not the only ways to protect your organization against a security breach. There are a few security best practices. I'll be going through 8 of them that should always be included in a business environment. So the first one is backups, and it's very, very important to have backups run regularly on your systems. It's recommended that you have a full backup taken at least once a week and then incremental backups in between to back up the data that has changed throughout the week. And the backup should be stored in a secure location offline, which there are companies where if you're using tapes, they'll come pick up the tapes and store them for you, or you could use a cloud-based solution that encrypts the data through an online portal. So those are 2 different types of options if you want to back up your data. And the reason for this is, for example, if you get an email and it happens to be a ransomware and you click it, then the ransomware will encrypt files, and instead of paying the ransom amount, you could just go back to your backups and restore them. So examples like that kind of show why backups are very important. For risk analysis, this will allow for analyzing potential dangers to your business or an individual in a business. So this risk analysis can determine what are critical systems and what are potential vulnerabilities to it, and what can be done in the event that an attack does happen and those vulnerabilities are exploited. The risk analysis should be practiced and updated regularly to ensure that they're viable and up to date and everything. And then a very simple security practice that can be done and is often overlooked is just staff training. So with things like social engineering and phishing attacks just happening so often, simply teaching employees how to avoid these attacks and what to look for in an email, phone call, or unknown person in your building, these can prevent a major breach from occurring. I mean, human error is a big thing as seen in the political parties that were attacked. That was all human error, clicking the link and allowing that user into the system. It's just really important to inform staff that if they are ever unsure of something they are receiving or a person in the building, to just verify and contact IT or higher up and just make sure that that was actually sent to them, that that person should be in that building. And if no one can confirm that, then you can take it further from there, but you could have avoided a potential attack. So next is vulnerability scanning and patching, and it's very important to be keeping up with regular vulnerability scans, which can lessen the chances of a hacker discovering a vulnerability that you didn't know was there and could have been fixed. Vulnerability scans can give IT individuals in a business an opportunity to better secure their network by having this ability to see what vulnerabilities are present and what threat they pose to the network. Patching is also very critical in fixing any current vulnerabilities. Some vulnerabilities just simply require a patch to be installed, which are released to respond to known flaws and fix them before they do become a danger. So these can usually just be downloaded and just run. Very simple. Application whitelisting, it basically allows only approved applications to be installed and run on a system. And this can prevent any malicious software from unknowingly installing itself. As for incident response, having an incident response plan in place can give a business the chance to quickly and efficiently act when an incident does occur. So a plan can significantly affect how quickly a business can jump back and get back running after they have discovered that they've had a security breach and there's a threat in their system. So this is very, very important for a company, because without an incident response plan in place, it could just be havoc trying to fix the breach that happened and figure out how to stop it from happening in the future and getting everything back up. It's just a lot to take in when you have an attack. So for business continuity, you want to check if business operations will be able to continue in the event that an incident does happen, which would cause an important system to be inactive for a long period of time or a certain period of time. You want to make sure this is tested regularly, usually tested off hours so it doesn't affect anyone's workday, to be certain that your organization will still be able to operate. God forbid an important system is down for a while, you'll still be able to run your whole business. And the last one is penetration testing. So this is essentially hacking your own system, and it can be a very, very effective method in security. It's used to exploit vulnerabilities in a deeper sense, kind of going along with the vulnerability scan, but it can get more deep into your network and see what vulnerabilities will lead to more vulnerabilities and more exploits and so on. And this can be done by a hired outside company, either an internal pen test or an external pen test, kind of depending on what you need for your business and network. And basically, this penetration tester will make an attempt at breaking into your network through a series of hacking methods and just see how far they can get, how much data they can get out, depending on what kind of penetration test you're looking for and what's vulnerable right now. And after a penetration test is done, the company you hired will typically write up a report to review everything, and this report will show what was discovered, what exploits, what their risk levels are, and suggestions that can be done to further fix this to avoid any potential security breaches. And these are just the resources that I've used. And are there any questions? We're going to go through questions soon, I believe, right, Jeff?
We sure are, Amy. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So we'll open it up to questions here, but before we kind of get to those questions, I just want to kind of expand on a couple things Amy said, because this is just great information. And, you know, we talk all the time about phishing emails. We write blog posts on it. You've probably seen those. We have done webinars in the past on them. We'll probably do them in the future as well. But one of the things that really is just amazing is just how, number one, prevalent phishing emails are, number one, and number two, how often they work. What I mean by that is obviously in this example that Amy has shared with us, we can see how it not only worked, but it worked very effectively against some very high-ranking members of political parties. But if you just do some research and look at some of the different statistics that are out there, it's just mind-boggling. Number one is the number of emails that go out. And we did a presentation at a conference about 6 or 7 months ago, and it was really just talking about how these types of cyber criminals have changed their tactics. They used to be very loud and you know, kind of bang on the front door to try and get in through exploiting your technology, and now they've realized that good, bad, or indifferent, people are really the weakest link in information security. And that's not a knock on us, because we're all human. And as I like to say, curiosity kills the cat at times. But the point that Amy made around educating your staff is so critical. They're all important, of course, but your first line of defense is really in this day and age your employees, and making sure that they, number one, understand what the threats are that are out there, and number two, kind of creating a culture of security where they can ask the question and say, hey, this looks a little strange to me. Why is this, why am I receiving this email asking me to enter my username and password? Should you really be asking for my password type scenario? So just kind of raising the bar a little bit and asking that question. So to give you an example, we do phishing tests all the time for clients in all different industries. And all the time we hear, yes, let's do a phishing test, but we know we're going to do well. It's not going to be a big deal. We've trained our employees. They know what's up. They know not to click on the link. Every time between 40 to 50% of the sample clicks on the link. So telling people is good. It's a good first step. But if you're going to use security awareness training and educating your employees as a once-a-year compliance check the box, I don't know that you're going to get the results that you're looking for. So that's the challenge. And some of the different compliance requirements that we're seeing out there are moving more towards a more thorough, somewhat aggressive methodology for security awareness training. PCI DFS 3.2 for service providers suggests that you do security awareness education on a quarterly basis, which I think is a great idea because the more information you can share with your employees, the better protected you're going to be. Because again, you can have the greatest technology in the world. It takes one person to click on a link and the game's over. So sorry to jump up on my soapbox there. I just wanted to kind of share that, but that's just great information to kind of bring back to your employees and just share with them. And hire a firm to help out with it. It's better that the firm finds out and finds that 40 to 50% of your employees are going to click on a link as opposed to a Russian cyber criminal finds out that 40 to 50% are going to click on the link. So I'll quiet down now, I promise, and we'll open it up to your questions.
Yeah,
so again,
and just to go along with what you said, it's truly amazing how real these emails look too. I mean, people are using Amazon and you really can't tell that that's a phishing email. I mean, you see it and it's like, your order hasn't been processed, please put in more information, and automatically you're like, oh, okay, and you start putting it in because it seems legitimate and it directs you to a site that does look legitimate. So you feel like there's no reason to not trust it. And even someone walking in the building, I mean, it's amazing what a suit and a clipboard will do, how far they can get.
That's a great point too. You're absolutely right. And I saw a presentation once where it was another organization that was conducting social engineering exercises. They said if you want to fit in a company, wear a shirt and tie and grab a coffee cup, and you'll be amazed how far you can get, which is the truth if you look the part and play the part. So, Amy, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. And this is not a question that came in, so I apologize. This is my question, but I kind of know the answer, but I want to share it with the folks that are out there. You talked about the phishing emails and how legitimate they can look. Are there certain things that we should be looking for in these emails that maybe can kind of tip us off? You know, like as an example, the Amazon email, right? Like obviously the first tip would be is if you did not place an order with Amazon, that should be a red flag. But let's just say maybe you did. What should you kind of look for in those different emails that might tip you off that you're going to not the right spot?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are a few things to look for. You, of course, want to look for spelling errors. If there are any grammatical errors or spelling errors, I mean, coming from a CEO, CFO, a company like Amazon, they're usually not going to be there. That's a huge red flag. If there's a link in there, you can also hover over the link. Don't click it, just hover over it with your mouse or cursor, and it will show the URL that's going to be directed to. If that URL has absolutely nothing to do with the link it's supposed to be bringing you to, there's a red flag. Also, you can look at who it's coming from. A lot of these phishing emails, they'll come from some very, very weird email address that has nothing to do with the email. Literally like a bunch of numbers or letters or a word that makes no sense. And if it's Amazon, maybe it's directing you to some weird site that just has no meaning to it. Those are red flags. And what you can do in those situations is it's best to send an email, but a new email. Do not reply to that one. You want to send a new one, maybe to Amazon customer service, send a new one to your CEO. It's just very important that you don't reply to it. This is a brand new email. And just verify. Say, hey, I got this email. It seems a little different, a little weird. I would just want to verify that it actually did come from you. And that's, I mean, even if you're ever unsure about any email, that's just a safe thing to do. The most you're going to get back, I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to be like, yes, I did send it. Please reply to it. So just simple things like that.
Awesome. Good stuff. It's funny you mentioned that because about, let's see here, let me do some math on this here. I think it was back in the September timeframe, we transitioned to a new payroll system here at Compass, and we got an email that looked a little questionable, I'm not going to lie, saying to sign in to view our pay statement. And I think every person in the company questioned it and gave our poor HR manager a little bit of grief about not giving us a heads up that it was coming. But again, this is what we're talking about here, asking that next kind of question like, okay, why am I getting this email asking me to create an account or enter a username and password? This doesn't seem right. Why is my CFO sending me an email asking me to, do a wire transfer for $86 million to a country that we've never done business, and just asking that next logical question. So all good stuff. So Amy, we have a couple of questions, folks. If you have any other questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to pop them into that chat box, please, and we can get to those. First question. We talked about this a little bit during the presentation, of course, but what is an advanced persistent threat, or APT?
So an advanced persistent threat is basically when someone has unauthorized access to a network and can go undetected for a long period of time, similar to what APT 2928 did, how they went just undetected, no one knew they were there, and they were able to take information.
Gotcha. So basically hides in there and just sits out and, okay, cool.
Yep,
Good
does
stuff.
what they need to do, and no one knows they're there.
No one knows they're there. That's the scary part to it. Okay. Next question that we have is, how do you prevent cross-site scripting?
This is a great question. So this is, of course, for more of the IT side when you develop a web page, but a few steps to prevent cross-site scripting is you want to only allow HTTPS cookies, which HTTPS is the more secure version of HTTP. So if you can only use HTTPS, that's a big thing. And you can also pass external web page data through a filter, and the filter will basically filter out common malicious keywords like script, which an attacker will usually inject into a website when cross-site scripting.
Okay, excellent, good stuff. I think those are the questions that we have. Any other questions that come in? So I'll wrap some things up here first. Amy, thank you very much for presenting on this. This has been awesome. Hopefully I didn't talk too much. I apologize. I tend to like to chit-chat a bit here, but next month's webinar we're going to be having is going to be on the top 10 things that you can do to have a more secure 2017. So do some great stuff, probably cover a little bit of the stuff that Amy covered, of course, and some different pieces in there that are more kind of focused from security as a whole, as opposed to just looking at the specific incident. I'll be sending out a copy of the presentation to everybody via email later this afternoon. We are recording the webinar, so there'll be a link that you can view the recording, or if you want to share that recording with any of your employees, friends, colleagues, whoever, family members, to get our views up. No, I'm just kidding. To educate them on this different stuff, that'd be awesome. So that'll be included in there. Again, thank you everyone for your time. Thank you, Amy. Great job presenting this, and we look forward to speaking with you all soon. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.